I'm Gwen, Preston of Resource Maven. We're here at my new conference called Financing Opportunities, and I'm joined by Charles Funk of Vizsla Resources. And if you haven't heard of Vizsla, it's because it's a fairly new entity. I mean, the company itself debuted about a year ago, but you just came back to trade with a transformative deal for the company. So why don't you tell us about the Panuco project, where it is, what it is, you know, the basics before we get as we get started.
Yeah, we literally came back to trade yesterday. It's been a lot of hard work, and our CEO, Mike Connett, would love to be sitting here telling you this story. He's actually flying back from Mexico as we build the team to do the exploration.
Fair enough.
The project's a new story to the market. It's a big silver district in Sinaloa that's never been put together before. We did two key deals with two landowners to put together a 15 by 8K district,
right.
With really high grade silver, you know, up to 2.2 kilo silver numbers in earlier drilling. We've got an option over a mine, a mill, tailings, a whole heap of infrastructure, and we have a 2-year runway to put together the exploration to see if it justifies buying it.
There's a whole bunch to dive into here. So let's talk about what this district has been so far. I mean, you talk about there's a mine, there's a mill, that's great, but there's also 35 kilometers of workings, there's a whole bunch of historic mines, there's currently operating stuff. So let's talk about what you know about this district and what it's been up until this point.
It's an unusual property to describe to people because it's been continuously in production for over 450 years.
Right.
But there's no geology map, there's no systematic sampling. So it was found in Spanish times and continually worked, but people just found ore, followed ore. They've never got ahead of the resources, or they've never looked beyond what's immediately in front of them. The only reason we got this deal together, in all honesty, was the depressed silver price. If silver wasn't at $15, I don't think this deal would have been here today.
Right.
Deal wouldn't have been there to do. Sorry.
So they've been mining, they've been pulling, and mining some really impressive grades. That's why small-scale miners continue to operate, is when grades are very impressive. But it's always also been very fractured ownership. You say you brought together two projects. That's given you a consolidation of a district. So first of all, you can track veins across what was property boundaries for the first time. And secondly, nobody's really, except for one small sort of program in the mid-2000s, nobody's really taken a modern look at this. Like, geophysics is like well down the list of things that haven't been done.
Exactly. So as I said, on one hand, it's in production, but on the other hand, only 2 of 20 veins have been drilled. You know, it's hard to explain to people the scale of this. So we're going to attack it in 2 ways. We're going to start going underground and resampling some of these workings and work up the really low risk, high priority targets.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we've got a team in the field now working up all these other targets. And so we should have plenty of news flow as well. And
then one thing is when you hear about a project that's been in production for 400 years intermittently, I think some people would wonder, well, have they taken all the good stuff? So I know production has only gone down to a certain depth. So can you talk about potential on that from that regard?
Yeah, so about sort of 200 to 300 metres, depending on the topography, they hit the water table, and everything stops. All the historic workings stop at that level. So one of the first things we're going to do is go into those workings and drill underneath.
Yeah.
We don't know whether the veins continue, or we know the veins will continue. We don't necessarily know how deep. But that's a great first target. It's just we know there's ore here. We're drilling here because they couldn't mine it for the water table.
Absolutely. And okay, you mentioned the 2-year runway that you have to figure out how much, whether this asset makes sense for the price that you have to pay. Talk about that situation a little bit.
So the deal was put together by a private group called Can-Am, and Vizsla's acquiring Can-Am. We will make a 6 million share payment, and it'll be a total of 18 million shares on performance. The underlying deal, as you said, because we need to put the resources together to justify the acquisition, we've negotiated a $1.15 million worth of payments for 2 years worth of exploration.
Right.
If we see that potential, then we can convert and purchase all the mill, the infrastructure. And then how do you value the time it takes to put permits and ejidos and a mining community together? So that's why the deal's structured like that, to put it together, and then potentially we could turn it on and become a producer in very short order.
So now you have 2 years, a huge amount of work in front of you. So clearly Vizsla will have to raise money in the near term to fund what you will be leading as a pretty intensive exploration effort. You're going to be busy for 2 years.
Yeah, so once the deal closes, we'll have just short of $500,000. And a bit like the Silvercrest analogue, where they went underground at Las Chispas, did all that sampling, went from high confidence to step out. We can do exactly the same, and we will do exactly the same. The advantage for us is that it's cheap. So as we build that up, we'll be putting news flow out over the next few weeks. And then as we move to drill, beginning of next year, possibly late this year, we would look to do a financing to fund that program.
And I mean, there's lots of things we could dive into about why you think there's so much potential. I mean, there's historic grades, there's a bit of historic drilling, there's all this mining that has happened. Let's talk just about cumulative strike. There's one good, and touchstones for how that rates in the district.
Yeah, when I put on my boffin hat, I talk about epithermals. Only a small amount of a vein in an epithermal contains the mineralisation.
Yeah.
So if you don't have lots of veins, you can't put together a big resource.
Yeah.
So if you add the cumulative length of all your veins up, it's a proxy for potential.
Right. So
we've got over 75 k's of what we know now, and that's clearly going to grow. And we've got a footprint that matches the major footprints in Mexico. So it'll be a fun exploration challenge to see what kind of resource number and whether we can match some of those monster mines.
Well, you've got your work cut out for you, but at least it's an exciting job in the front.
It's also in Mazatlan, 40 minutes east of Mazatlan, so it's not the hardest place to work.
Fair enough.
Blessed for infrastructure, and it's going to be a fun next.
And I mean, I think it is worth emphasizing, I was about to wrap up, but I think it is worth emphasizing you can't put a value on the permits and the social license that you acquire with this project.
Yeah, I think we'll focus initially on getting those resources, but I think if you asked any company who had a resource, would you like to pay $40 million to not go through that sort of irrelevant, depressed time of putting together the permits and getting the confidence in your resource and saying, no, we'll purchase production, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. Well, congrats on finding the asset and good luck going forward. I look forward to keeping up with the story.
Thank you very much, Gwen.
Thanks.